Hello and welcome back to this series of instructional videos on the Intopia simulation. This topic is production, so we're going to learn how to actually make some stuff as we go throughout the simulation game. Okay, so you'll see in this particular video we're going to talk about how to produce X. Okay, this is your component product, so that might be a battery, depending on the type of simulation that you're running. So for instance, if we're running the smartphone game, product X would be a battery and product Y would be the finished smartphone. We'll talk about your virtual warehouse. So every team has one of these where they store their products. And we'll look at the difference between your standard and deluxe grades and various timing issues that arise throughout the simulation. Okay. Producing X is fairly simple. All you need is an on-stream plant. So basically you need to either build a plant in the previous period, because that plant takes a period to be ready to produce, or you can buy a plant from another team that is already on stream. And you also need a patent or the ability to produce a particular grade of X. Okay, so remember that there's 9 different improvements. So if you want to produce X2, you actually need the ability to produce X2. So that's either from having done your own R&D or having received a license for that. So if we go back to our decision program here and look at production and then go over to produce X, you'll see that I've already got some data put in here, but producing X is pretty simple. You're allowed 3 different plants. So let's say that we've built just 1 plant in each area, or in this particular area, which is North America. So you change your areas up here. So let's say we're going to produce in China, for instance. We have nothing in this particular thing. We're going to produce grade 2, and then you just simply enter the quantity. Okay, and remember that this is in thousands of units, so we're going to produce 56,000 grade 2s in this particular plant. Okay, and then if you have a higher grade to produce, let's say we also have the ability to produce grade 4, we might decide to produce that, for instance, in a second plant, so we could do 80,000 units there. Press save, and that's it. You're all done. So you've produced a particular grade of product in that, and we can just go back to production. Okay, so that's fairly straightforward. Okay, now you can produce 2 different grades in the same plant, but of course that's not necessarily optimal, because the program would actually assume that you would have to switch things over to produce another grade. Similarly, producing product Y, you also need an on-stream Y plant, so one that you've built in a previous period or received from another team. You also need the patent for the appropriate grade of Y. The only complication here is that you also need an available supply of compatible X. So remember that this game focuses on 2 products, a component good and a finished good. So if you're producing smartphones, you need batteries to go into these smartphones. So you need someone to supply you with those X, or you need to produce them yourself. So anyways, at the beginning of the period, you need some compatible X in order to produce. Okay? And producing Y is very similar to producing X. You'll see that it looks very much the same way. You just select the area up here on this particular drop-down box, select the grade level, and then select the particular quantity that you wish to produce. Now there's a couple of other things that you'll see down here, such as the processing priority of components. So it's possible that you may have 2 different grades of components. Say you have an X2 and an X4 in inventory. The computer wants to know which grade to use first, because it could be that both of them are compatible with, in this particular case, Y1. So you just select here whether you want to use the lowest grade first for your Y production or use the highest grade first. Okay. There's also production priority for product Y here, which says if you have a fixed quantity of components available, do you want to produce the highest grade first using those components or the lowest grade? Now these default to using the lowest grade first, but you can certainly change that. Okay, so if you decide to change to the highest grade in this case, and we're producing 30,000 units of that, then the computer would know to take the components first and dedicate those to producing, in this case, grade 3, rather than the lowest grade of grade 1. Okay. Down here we have the ability to set a component transfer price. So you don't have to do that. You know, the reasons to do this are to truly reflect the cost of X that goes into your production of Y. So if you're, for instance, if you produce X and it costs you $10 a unit, if you don't put anything in here, the computer will reflect that cost of the component at $10. But if you want to mark it up a little bit internally so that you can show that your components are actually having a positive margin, you can do so by entering in a component price here of $15 or whatever. Okay, so that's a markup of $5 on the component units. And there's several reasons you might wish to do this. You know, it could be that you have a manager that's in charge of components and he'd like to have a positive bottom line. It makes him feel better, so you would reflect that by showing that that particular segment of the operation is profitable. Okay? Otherwise, you're just going to see that component sales are going to net out to 0 each time. Okay? So that's pretty straightforward in terms of how to produce X or how to produce Y. The important thing is making sure that you have the right amount of X available. So you'll find in the data log, which is provided on the resources section of the website, that you have an XY component or conversion chart. Okay, and this is just an example here of what's provided, and this will differ according to the type of simulation that is being run. But in this particular case, you can see in the grayed out areas what the conversion or the compatibility is. So if you wish to produce Y2, for example, okay, then the options that are given to you here are that you need 3 X2s or 4 X3s in order to be able to produce Y2. So this doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense in terms of batteries and smartphones. So let's put it into the context of something like computers. So let's say this is a Y2 PC, and these are chips. Okay, so you would need 3 chips of grade X2 in order to produce a Y2. If you're going to use X3, you actually need to put 4 of them in there. Okay, or alternatively, if you are producing Y3, you would actually need 6 of those grade 3 chips. And if you see zeros, that just means it's not compatible. So if you want to produce a Y2, you can't use an X0 or an X1. You actually need to have that grade available of the other X, so X2 in that case. Okay, so this conversion chart needs to be managed and understood so that you can manage your inventory as you go and manage your R&D so that you're able to produce. Okay, virtual warehouse, each team has one in each area. Okay, and it's capable of holding 2 grades of each product. So these are typically called standard and deluxe, and that's what you'll see on your output is they're called standard and deluxe. Okay, and that's just a capacity constraint on the game, that you can only have 2 grades of each product. Okay, you pay for the warehouse when it is used. So if you have to store inventory for a period, then you'll pay an inventory charge. And you'll find that that inventory charge goes up the more that you use it. So it's not a linear relationship at all. The more inventory you have, the more you pay per unit. Okay. When you produce X or Y, all of the finished inventory goes to the warehouse at the end of the period where it can be made available for sale either to the end consumers or to other teams in the game. Okay. Okay. A couple of things to remember about production and timing and inventory management. One is that production takes a period always. Okay, so you can't produce and sell the same inventory in the same period ever. Okay, so remember that when you produce something, it goes to that virtual warehouse where it'll be available for sale the next period. Plant construction also takes a period. Okay, so it takes a little bit of time to build a plant. So if you build a plant in period 1, it will be available for you to produce in period 2. Okay, And remember, you have those 2 inventory bins per area per product. So if you have X3 is your lowest grade, that will go into your standard bin, and X4 is your deluxe grade or your next highest grade, that will go into your deluxe bin. Okay, and it's important that you manage these 2 bins, otherwise you end up getting some of your grades downgraded. Okay, so if you have X3 and X4 available, and for some reason somebody ships you X5, what ends up happening is those X4s that you had in your deluxe bin end up getting downgraded down to your standard, so they all become X3s. Okay, and that can be a bit of a pain in the butt sometimes. Okay, typical timing issues that are associated if you decided you were going to be an integrated firm, so you're going to build both components and finished goods. You might find that your implementation might look something like this. In period 1, you build an X plant, and in period 2, you produce X in that plant. At the same time, while you're building a Y plant. In period 3, you're producing some X and producing some Y. This is the first time in period 3 that you're actually able to produce Y. And it's also the first time that you're able to actually sell some products. So you can actually sell some of that X that was produced in period 2, because that is now available for sale. So you'll see in period 4, this will be the first time that you're able to sell your finished goods or your Y product. Okay, so you'll see that in periods 1, 2, and 3, there's not a heck of a lot happening in terms of inventory sales. So this particular building phase in the first 3 periods, you're probably losing a little bit of money, but not anything to be concerned about, because you'll have things to sell in later periods. Okay, costs of production. The starting costs of production are provided in the data log, or at least an estimate of what those are, and you'll find out what those are for the grade 0 products when you do your test decisions as well. Now, there are lots of ways that you can lower your variable costs. One of them is to spend money on something called methods improvement. Okay, so what methods improvement does is it works to lower those variable costs. So if you start with your costs at $10, you spend some money on methods improvement, you might find that in subsequent periods you can get them down to maybe $9 or $8. Okay, and you'll find that in the production screen on the website. Oh, my session is timed out here, so I'll just log back in and go back to production. You'll find improved methods of production. This is fairly straightforward. So just in any particular area, for in this case area 2 or the European Union, I'm just going to dedicate some money, say $500,000. Again, this is in thousands of dollars towards methods improvement. Okay, and what that does is you can consider that to be something like training or upgrading equipment or maintenance or that sort of thing, which will work on reducing those costs of productions. Okay, you'll find that there's also some market research pertaining to what your optimal capacity is. So even though the capacity of your plant might be 50,000 units, that's not maybe the best amount to produce. You might find that it's closer to 40 is where you get your lowest variable cost. And in longer runs, you'll find that you actually have to replace some of your older plants. And there's lots of factors that actually work towards increasing your variable costs, such as your grade level. If you're producing a higher grade, you have to assume that that costs are going to go up on that thing, and there may be area differentials, such as it may cost more to produce in Europe than it does in China. And there also may be environmental changes throughout the game. So there may be labor strife in one particular area, which works on increasing variable costs. Okay. Capacity is typically the same for each team in each area and doesn't normally change unless there's some sort of environmental event that occurs. You may find that capacity might go up over the course of a game due to improved methods of production, but normally you'll be signaled about that. Okay. There's also fixed costs that are provided in the data log. So for instance, it may cost you $100,000 a year in terms of fixed costs just to operate a plant. That makes sense. That would be your heat and your hydro and that sort of thing. You'll also find that there is a depreciation expense on your income statement. In this particular game, that is straight line and is fixed. Okay, so you might find that the depreciation of an X-plant, for instance, is 5%. Okay, and that's really all you need to know about production.